How's it going, YouTube? Coming to today with another video, and today, guys, what the bring to you is going to be board breakers, and this is going to be very important because the format is so much like chess right now, where you really have to make sure that you're doing the right things in the right order to get the best result. And there's a lot of times where you can make a couple mistakes in different decks, but right now, more than ever, I feel like with all the grind games that are happening, you really want to make sure that your cards are being used as effectively as possible, and board breakers are no different. They're supposed to be trading for a lot for very little. So let's talk about the ways that you can really utilize those board breakers to do the best for you. If you haven't already checked out my sponsors over at Imperium Duels to Dragonshield, Gem, Cloud, RW, or Grimoire, definitely go ahead and do so, all down below in the description. Also, if you haven't already used my TCGPlayer link, it's down below as well. It costs nothing to you and only supports the channel. I always appreciate when you guys use this. This is just another way to directly support me without having to do anything extra. And I really do appreciate it. But without further ado, let's hop right on into our topic. So board breakers, there's definitely a lot that are pretty good right now, and there's a lot that are pretty bad right now. If you want to go see where I rank everything, look at my last video, which is the tier list for board breakers. Now today we're going to be going over why I feel like these ones in particular are very good, and talk about why I feel like other ones just aren't really meeting the mark right now. So, for your best board breakers, this does include Eclipse. I added in a little bit later. But Talent, Thrust, Ulti Slayer, the Striker package, Lightning Storm, Nibiru, and Book of Eclipse. These are by and large your best board breakers, and we're going to go into each one individually and talk about why I feel that is. Now for the why. Ulti Slayer is an overall fantastic card right now. This card's been waiting for a really long time to see play. Ever since its release, it really hasn't seen much, but now it really is. And there's a lot of really good targets in the extra deck to be able to send. There's the Paleo Link card if you're playing a back row deck that says if a back row that you control would be destroyed, you can banish it instead, which is pretty cool. We have the Tri-Brigade Link 5 that you can send, and then that effect will go off so you can dump like a Garura and draw a card. You also are able to send things like Muriel Logic or Malong. So there's a lot of very cool targets for Ulti Slayer that make this card very versatile. Obviously, right now, Muriel Logic is like the go-to right now. It's a very strong card. But not to say that this card is not just doing absolute work right now. A couple of the targets that I really like right now for this are things like Terahertz, because you shut down the Deceive Worm being able to be a thing in the graveyard. You also shut down your opponent being able to go for things like Codosol or like a Pack Bit. They can always chain something else that's like a spell or trap and then chain Terahertz if they want to, but at least you get rid of the problem right away. Clearing the Detonator for sure. Usually it's paired with like a Caesar, so you can clear either one. I'm probably just going after the Detonator, but it just depends what your hand's looking like and what you want to deal with on the board versus what you just want to get rid of immediately. And then if you haven't already really been paying attention, there's been some Griffin lines popping up, so you really want to make sure that you're on top of those, because Griffin can be a very brutal card if you're not prepared for it. So this is just a few of many that I feel like Ulti Slayer is hitting right now very well, and it's a good reason to make sure that you have this card in your sideboard at 3. Now, I cannot stress this enough. If you have access to Nibiru, which it's pretty accessible, you need to be maining 3 of this card. This card is absolutely phenomenal. Once again, being able to hit Terahertz is going to be really important. You shut down a lot of very good effects for your opponent. You also are able to just take out Desiree immediately, which is fantastic, because your opponent could go like Lacrima, and then target the Agumde, and then Agumde come back to the board, and then bring back the Desiree. But a lot of people are already cutting Agumde as well, and that's one thing where I personally had to cut it out of my list because I just didn't have room. And that card's fantastic, but I'm already siding Dweller, right? Like, I just can't keep finding room for extra cards in the side and whatnot, because I already don't like siding extra cards as it is, and you have to make cuts where you need to make cuts. So making sure that you can just go ahead and get rid of the Desiree immediately is fantastic. Even better when they use Desiree to out your Nibiru in the first place, because if you're playing something like Ryzeal, you can go ahead and just like slam X to the board, or you can summon a Cash, right? So very strong. I really do like it even against the Yubel deck. There's only one Phantom, so the second that you just like go to drop Nibiru and they Phantom you, it's one card that you literally don't have to deal with again. At least not for a while, because they would have to like throne put it back or something, right? So really strong, and that's something that I'm a huge fan of. And then also, I talked about this in a couple videos already, but if your opponent presents Necroquip Princess and an Engraver on board, they're just going to ask you if that's okay, because the next action is either summoning Caesar or going for Desiree, and usually if you say, like, yeah, that's fine when there's 2 6s on the board, they will just go for a Caesar, but there's also a good amount of times they'll just go for a Desiree anyway, because they're like, oh, they don't have Nibiru, so you can always metagame them really hard and just hold Nibiru, but just make sure that you can answer Caesar if you hold it, because you could just be like, well, I lose. Or you drop it here, you take them away from a Caesar, and they just have their regular engine that they're going for. So Nibiru being a very flexible card in these situations, I think this card is way too good. It's even better on the crackback, to be honest, because when your opponent's putting in all the resources to just go ahead and clear your board and kill, it's kind of nice when you're like, actually, rock, and then you start your next turn with, like, normal summon Ice Ryzeal, right? Like, it's kind of crazy. So I like rock a lot right now. The cards are really good. Now, Lightning Storm or Duster, either or, I think both of these are fantastic. Lightning Storm, obviously, being the one that's a little bit more versatile. I do like this card a lot. Wow, Terahertz is really just catching every stray under the sun. But yes, you can also force out Disave Worm with Lightning Storm, which is really nice as well. Maybe it won't be the most impactful, but it does turn on things like Talent and Thrust, so we do love that. We have GWC that you go ahead and force. You make your opponent go ahead and summon out Whitebinder, which is really nice. You can go ahead and force the Desiree out too. The Desiree is only protected from targeting, not from destruction. And then you can always kill the Cross and the Birth at the same time, which is fantastic, because those are both very annoying interactions to deal with. So Lightning Storm is pretty goated. A, again, just for turning on your Thrust and Talent. B, for just making sure your opponent has to be forced to do everything they want to do once the Lightning Storm hits the board. So, the Striker package. There is a lot of different ways that you can play it. One of the ways is in Tenpai, they go the Hornet Drone into Kagari. Kagari add back the Hornet Drone, summon the token, make a Hida, crash the Hida, get Chandra. There's a lot of very cool ways that the deck is able to interact with their opponent during the battle phase, and that's another way that you can go into like a pseudo board breaker line there, because you get into the Tenpai cards, and the Tenpai cards just kill. They just break through most boards of that situation too, which is really nice. But the Striker engine in general, being able to have cards like Burner and Widow, and I always sided Jamming Waves when I play this engine because I think that it's really strong. Being able to tear up a board, then also turn on the Talent and Thrust as well is pretty strong, especially because your opponent's going to be forced to make a lot of plays when you have things like Burner involved. Because Burner, once it resolves, if you have 3 spells engraved, you non-targeting blow up a back row, so it really does force your opponent's hand. The other thing you see on here is Droplet. I'm not a huge fan of Droplet right now, but if you're playing the Striker cards, I always recommend Droplet, because if you know the interaction, let's say that you have 2 spells engraved, and then you activate Burner, and it's not your 3rd spell, and your opponent does something to it, you can chain Droplet, throw it engrave, and then when it resolves, it'll resolve with 3 spells engraved. And so that's the beauty of playing the Droplet and the Striker engine together, because those cards, once you have Droplet involved, are kind of crazy. Especially because your opponent might say that something like Burner is fine because they don't see the 3rd spell, and then when you drop the Droplet out of your hand, it's like, oh, this just got a whole lot worse. Because if your opponent's dumping a spell from it, it just makes things really awkward, because there's not a whole lot of cards that you can chain to this anymore. As far as the why on these two, do I really have to say it? If I go first and I see Talent and you activate a hand trap, I win the game. I'm looking at your hand, I'm ripping your last interruption, I know what your hand looks like, and I'm putting you on better top deck than nuts, right? Like, I'm absolutely just going to say these are like above tier 0. These cards are broken, they have been broken, they've always been broken. Just having Talent to look at the hand is insane, and Thrust to set D barrier or Sanctum or whatever you want it to be. A lot of times even different dimension ground, so a searchable shifter is just absolutely absurd, right? So for me, these cards are like the best cards in the game right now. They are so phenomenal. You should be maining 3 Talent and siding 3 Thrust. And just Eclipse, I think this card's really good, but I also don't like playing cards that can get ashed as a board break. It's not my favorite. You do make your opponent interact with you, though, so it does turn on talent and thrust, and I think that's the redeeming quality of it. But I'm not a huge fan of this. I do like Book of Moon usually a lot more, but I also don't really feel like Book of Moon's that good right now. There's just too many things on the board. So if I was going to play one of the books, I would just play Eclipse because it forces out way too many things. And if it resolves, you probably win the game. So definitely something that I would recommend. Now for my special tidbit, I like Foolish Return right now. I think this card's fantastic. Your opponent's going to be banishing Whitebinder and then linking it off for Tear Hurt, and it's going to just stay engraved for the GWC. So if your opponent uses GWC to bring it back, you can just chain Foolish Return and put it back in the extra deck. So that's really good. You can always go ahead and use Foolish Return on the Requiem. The Lacrimal will shuffle back, and then you put the Requiem back, and there's no more trap card in the graveyard. You can also do it on the target of Bident. So that's really solid during the battle phase. Telling your opponent that they just can't keep synchroing, right? Because usually they really need the extra body right now. So Foolish Return, not a bad card right now by any means. Especially if your opponent's going second with like Malice and they make Haggard. And on summon of Haggard, you go Foolish Return like the Dormouse they used to summon it. Brutal. I really like this card a lot right now, so if I had like a special tech option, I would say it's this one for sure. The not so great options. I really don't like any of these right now. Metaltronus, especially, I'd rather play Book of Eclipse. I think Metaltronus is very niche in what it can do. I think Book of Eclipse is just the better one. It answers more cards. It's also very generically useful going first and second. So is Metaltronus, but I feel like a Book of Moon in this game's history has always been the craziest thing possible. So in my opinion, I would say I would always go with like Eclipse, especially because like Metaltronus doesn't really save you in the battle phase versus Tenpai. Book of Eclipse does. So there's a couple of things that I feel like are just a lot more guaranteed to be helpful than things like Metaltronus. Super Poly, there was a couple comments on the last one that said this card was good. This card's really bad. Like, you're never going to be using this right now. It's never going to be effective. Use one of the other cards. It's not very good. Dark Ruler, you Dark Ruler Ryziel's end board, sure. They don't die. They have follow-up in hand and a cross negate and Paradise. Sounds like you didn't accomplish much. Evenly, though... Evenly is a hit or miss. Evenly can be very broken, it can be very good, versus multiple decks right now. Against Malice, you have to bait the save worm before you use it, so not my favorite. But at the same time, if you play against like Ryziel and you catch him off guard, Evenly is like, wow, that sucks. Because a lot of times right now, your opponent could be just going Caesar, and then they go into like their Ryziel end board. And then, you know, if you see them make like Desiree, that's where you're going to want things like your Nibiru, your Cosmic Cyclones for the sequence, so it turns off the Desiree effects, things like that. But Evenly is very hit or miss. It could be fine, but right now it's like not so great. I would just play one of the other ones. I hope that you enjoyed today's video, and I hope that you enjoyed this stream of content that I've been putting out. I love doing this so much. I hate working a day job, and I'm sure everyone else can concur with that. But, you know, the number one thing that would make me so happy is being able to make content full-time for y'all. I really do like doing this, and there's such a deep dive in this game and so many questions that I would love to answer for all of you 24/7. There are times when I'm just stuck at work and I can't make videos as much as I'd like to. I'm putting a real hard effort right now into just producing the best possible content that I can, that I always have tried to do. And, you know, subscribe to the channel and like the video. It helps me out a lot, and that's something that will help me push toward my goal of hopefully one day just making content daily for you guys. And that would be my absolute favorite thing to do. But I hope that you all have a wonderful night, and I'll catch you all in the next video. Thank you.